For this Blu-ray Spotlight, we're going to look at a couple of recent theatrical films, a straight-to-video film, and a couple of interesting documentaries. We're going to start with Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. Now, Wall Street, the original Wall Street, is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I say this as somebody who does not generally care for Oliver Stone movies. I love Wall Street. I think it's a great film from start to finish. I think Michael Douglas' performance is fantastic. Charlie Sheen is even fantastic, and the whole movie works from start to finish. Fast forward 20 or so years, and we have Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, the sequel starring Michael Douglas, and this time we have Shia LaBeouf taking the role of Charlie Sheen. Not the role, it's not the same character, it's the sort of the new character, the protege, if you will, of Gordon Gekko, who so famously once said that greed is good. Well, now we fast forward. Gekko is out of jail after serving 9 years for a whole bunch of financially related charges, and Shia LaBeouf plays the young stock trader who's interested in marrying Gordon Gekko's estranged daughter, Winnie, played by Carey Mulligan, who's a great actress but is very funny looking, and she makes a lot of funny facial expressions throughout the entire movie. This time around, the big bad guy is Josh Brolin, who plays, well, some sort of financial guy who does bad things. And that's part of the problem with this movie. In the original Wall Street, the jargon was thrown around fast and furiously, but for the most part, you could get the gist of what was going on, and you could kind of follow, because it wasn't really what was important. The film was about the characters, about Gordon Gekko, Bud Fox, and Bud Fox's dad, and the relationship between those characters. This movie, while it tries to be about relationships between, Gekko and his daughter, and Gekko and Shia LaBeouf, and LaBeouf and this Josh Brolin character, the problem is that so much of the film is taken up by this financial jargon and this financial terms and these subplots that have to do with all this financial stuff, that unless you're a Wall Street wizard, it's pretty hard to follow what's going on. The character beats work. Michael Douglas is magnetic as always, and every time he's on screen, the film is fantastic. The problem is he's not on screen a lot of the time. He's more of a supporting character in this film, and that's a big disappointment because he should be the focus of this movie. At over 2 hours long, Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps isn't a bad film, and it never really gets boring, but it gets lost in its own way sometimes, and I wish it had been a little bit better. I wish it had been more about Gordon Gekko and less about all these other characters that we just frankly don't care as much about. The film isn't a complete failure, and for a recent Oliver Stone film, judging by how bad most of his recent films have been, it's a lot better than it could have been. It's just not nearly as good as it should have been. That being said, the movie looks and sounds quite good on Blu-ray. It's not the kind of movie where you're going to be dazzled by the audiovisual presentation, but you do get clean, clear, solid imagery, good solid colors with fairly natural flesh tones, although slightly off color once in a while. And the soundtrack is pretty solid. It's dialogue based. The sounds of New York do certainly come out of your ear speakers once in a while. Nothing too fancy. In terms of extra features, we get an audio commentary by Director Stone, a conversation with Oliver Stone and the cast, a rise and fall of Wall Street featurette, some deleted and extended scenes with optional commentary by Oliver Stone, and a Fox Movie Channel Presents feature with the cast, some interviews there with the cast. You also get a digital copy of the film, so you can watch it on the go. Next up, we have Legends of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. That's actually Legend of the Guardians. Just one legend, apparently. It's interesting to me this film was largely ignored, even though it was Zack Snyder's next film following Watchmen and 300. I realize it's not kind of his normal purview. It's a computer-generated fantasy about a group of owls and some legendary owls. But it kind of got ignored. It didn't really get a hold of the family audiences, and the Zack Snyder fans didn't turn out for it, even though he is credited as the director of the film. Maybe that's because he's not an animation director, or maybe it's because people don't care as much about his animated projects as they do his real life, so to speak, projects. But either way, it's a decent film. I was a little disappointed because this is one of those films that I kind of thought might be a real sleeper hit, it might be a real gem. And it's not bad. It's gorgeous to look at, absolutely breathtaking. And the Blu-ray really does capture this film, I mean, just immaculately. It looks fantastic from start to finish. The problem is that while there's some really great voice acting going on, the characters do get jumbled together. I hate to say this, but the owls kind of all look the same, and after a while it gets hard to tell who's who, especially during the action scenes. And that's the problem. The film has some great action scenes that make use of Zack Snyder's traditional kind of trademark switch between fast motion and slow motion. But it's hard to tell who's fighting who in most of them, especially in the end when it's the big climax and there's hundreds of owls flying all over the place fighting each other. It's really hard to tell who you're rooting for, and that makes it a little bit less exciting of a film than it could have been. That being said, it's a good watch. Certainly, I think some adults will enjoy it and some kids will enjoy it. And like I said, it looks great. The sound is fantastic, but it's not everything it could have been. There are some great extra features. There is a maximum kid mode where you can explore the world of Ga'Hoole with Soren the Owl guiding you through the movie, a Rise of the Guardians bedtime story, so to speak, a music video, and 4 artwork galleries. Those are all exclusive to the Blu-ray. And then also with DVD, on the DVD and the Blu-ray, you get True Guardians of the Earth, which is a look into the world of the owls, and a new Looney Tunes cartoon, of all things, called Fur of Flying. There's also a digital copy of the film as well. So worth checking out, not fantastically great. Next up we have And Soon the Darkness, kind of a not as sleazy as it could have been thriller starring Amber Heard, Odette Yustman, and Karl Urban. And I wanted to watch this movie because I really like Amber Heard, and Odette Yustman is really easy on the eyes, and I think Karl Urban is a fantastic up-and-coming actor who has really shined in Star Trek and Red. And what could have been a torture porn film about the sex slavery industry turned out mostly be kind of a missing persons thriller, and in that respect it's enjoyable. It was certainly a tense film. It has a pretty good climax. The problem with the film is it's one of those movies where every single person in the world seems to be suspicious and guilty of something. Every single person in the movie gets a good 5-second shot where they look around nervously, uneasily. They look at somebody else conspiratorially. It's like as if every single person in South America is out to get these 2 American tourists, and that's not ultimately the case. That's kind of bothersome, frankly. It gets old after a while. It's like it's an hour-long movie that they stretched out to an hour and a half. The pacing is just a bit off. But again, good climax and some tense moments. So worth watching if you like a good thriller now and again. The Blu-ray lives up to its promise. It delivers a good, clean image, surround sound. It doesn't have a lot to work with. It's kind of a quiet movie for a thriller, although there's some moments of punctuated noise that really do kind of boom through your speakers. But it's nice to pick up on Blu-ray versus on DVD. Extra features give you some deleted scenes, a commentary with the director and some of the filmmakers, a director's video diary that includes behind-the-scenes footage from the set of the film. So there you go. That's worth looking at. Probably a rental. Next up we have Restrepo, the highly acclaimed National Geographic documentary about an outpost in Afghanistan that is filled with soldiers under all sorts of stress in this really incredible environment. It is a harrowing, brutal film to sit through. It's probably also a fairly important film to sit through. It really does give you a ground's eye look at the current war and war in general and what hell it really is and what people go through out in the middle of nowhere. If you can handle it, I recommend seeing it. It is really intense. Of course, it's a documentary. The high def works really well for it, but it's not the same as like a blockbuster movie. The surround sound will probably have you jumping out of your seat occasionally. Bonus features include deleted scenes, extended interviews, updates on the soldiers, which is nice to see, a photo gallery, and some public service announcements. So a really intense, moving film that you should definitely check out if you can handle the intensity of it and you don't mind the fact that ultimately it is kind of a war documentary about the whole Iraq war, which I know some people are really burned out on watching. This is not your typical war documentary, though. Definitely check it out. Finally, we have LennonNYC, which I've previously reviewed on DVD. This is the Blu-ray version of it. Came out about 3 weeks after the DVD. I'm not sure why it couldn't come out at the same time. It does include about 20 minutes of additional interviews that were not included on the DVD. The picture and sound quality don't vary greatly. I mean, sure, it looks a little more crisp and clean, but you're jumping back and forth between archival footage that's 30 years old, so it's not going to look that great, and new interviews, which certainly do look good, but there's nothing eye-popping about them. This isn't the kind of visual presentation that you're going to get from something like The Guardians of Ga'Hoole. That being said, LennonNYC is a terrific documentary that focuses on John Lennon's time in New York City, not his whole career, not his whole life, just his time, those last 5 years of his life mostly, where he lived in New York and was constantly under threat of being deported. There's some great interviews with people like Elton John and Jack Douglas, and of course Yoko Ono gives an extensive interview, which is interesting whether you love her or hate her. She certainly has a perspective on John Lennon that most people don't have. And it's definitely worth watching. It's a very good film, and like I said, you do get about 20 minutes of additional interviews on top of the film itself, which is almost 2 hours long. So John Lennon fans should definitely pick this one up, and I think picking it up in Blu-ray is the way to go, unless of course you already have the DVD, in which case it's not necessarily worth the upgrade.